Hello, 605 Speaks. I hope you have all dug out from the blizzard, unless you don't live in South Dakota or North Dakota or right on the borders of either of those states, because then your life is probably fine. But here in South Dakota, we have just got done with, depending on what part of the state you're in, 5 to 7 days of intense snow, intense cold, a lot of rain, a lot of yuck. And I think next on the agenda for our state is ground blizzards and dramatically low temperatures. They're talking -50, which sounds like it can't even be real, but it is. And over here on the east side of the state, we get hit pretty good. But as an urban girl, I live in town, and I have to say that I know my experience does not compare to the experience of most of the rest of the state. Um, I was able to get and go and be places and do things if I needed to, although everybody should try and stay home and only go to something you're required to do during this kind of weather. Did have a close family member get in a car accident. Everything was okay except for the vehicles, but it just reminds you can happen in an instant. Today is December 19th, 2022, which means tomorrow into the next day is winter solstice, which is my winter celebration. And I know a lot of people grow up learning about it as the shortest day of the year. And I prefer to consider it a celebration of the longest night, just that much more time to party. So if this is your part of the country and you have to spend your longest night buried under the snow, who would you want to spend it with and why? I would love to hear it. We're going to ask that question of my guest today. I have lots of questions of my guest today because I don't know if you've ever heard of the term van life, but we're going to be asking Ms. Leah B, about van life. So I'm going to bring her right onto the screen with me. Hello.
Hey, hey.
And
Oh, van life.
yes, and we were already talking about how my cats only love me when I'm recording, and this cat is biting me and clawing me and can hear your cat. So eventually, this might just become our cats talking to each other.
That would be funny.
So, South Dakota, you are West River, you're in the Spearfish zone, Spearfish area.
Yep, I'm actually tucked to slightly further west. I'm kind of slightly out of town towards the interstate.
How much
So
how much
right at the
snow,
foothills.
if you stepped out your door, how many inches of snow was, what was the maximum number of inches of snow you experienced in the last week?
I think we got closer to between 22 and 30 inches right here. It's kind of hard to tell because we also we're right on the foothills, between the plains and the Black Hills. So when the wind comes through Spearfish in some areas or even comes through the canyon areas, it will take the snow that just fell. A foot could fall and the wind comes and it's all gone.
Right.
It moves it around. So on one side of my yard, I have drift piles that are probably 3 feet high. And then in the middle of my yard, you can see grass because that's where the wind was blowing through.
Blowing it away.
So I did see some sticks up in the hills that were measured at 30 inches. Cheyenne Crossing got 30 inches. So I believe Spearfish probably got closer to that. Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. Just
Yeah.
crazy.
It's not the worst storm we've had. Atlas certainly brought 54 inches of snow in
Right.
2 or 3 days. And then we had one even in '08 that was worse than this one. But yeah, our whole town was shut down for 2.5 days. No
And
travel.
we were shut down as far as no travel outside, all the interstates, all the highways. The interstates were solidly closed. The highways were not advised to go on. But in the city of Sioux Falls, and I think folks I talked to, like in Rapid, in the city of Rapid, if you wanted to run and get a Taco John's, you could do it. But like you guys didn't have a choice to do anything.
No, no. And I think there were a few businesses that were kind of like holdouts, who were trying to stay open, like Safeway, but eventually they all closed down. And the convenience stores were even telling people, look, we're only open for emergency responders and things like that.
Right.
You're not supposed to be out here. So
Right.
There were a few people who, of course, I mean, when you're out of food or if you need things,
Right.
people were leaving their houses, but I don't think there were too many people who were out
Leaving
trying to,
frivolously. They weren't out trying to go shop at the
yeah,
gift stores. Yeah.
yeah, the weather was just nasty. I mean, you didn't want to really be dry. I've driven in some gross weather, and this is just one of those storms you just want to be inside in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about what does Spearfish have to offer it, so as far as your immediate area for like grocery shopping and things like that, preparing for a storm like this. I guess as a state we all had a little bit of warning, um,
Yeah.
although I know on our side of the state the warning was we might get 2 to 6 inches, and the next morning we woke up to 9 to 12, and
Yeah.
at least you guys had a little heads up by the time it got to your side it was going to be that much worse. But how about amenities where you live? How hard is it to prepare for a winter in the West where you are? How
Normally it's
easy
not
is it?
it's really not that difficult to prepare normally. We do struggle out here in Spearfish. I mean, it's a town of, I think we're just under 12,000 people, or roughly around 12,000 people. But because we're still dealing with supply shortages nationwide, our grocery stores are sometimes out of bread in normal times, or milk,
Right.
or, eggs. It depends on what's going on in the markets. So preparing for the storm wasn't that bad. I think a lot of people, I started seeing the shelves kind of emptying out before, in anticipation of the storm. We do, like my husband delivers groceries for Spark. And so we knew, even planning before that things were probably going to be on hold for 2 days.
Right.
So I think the vast majority of people were able to get stocked up at least for a few days and wait it out. I mean, it's hit or miss. We have our own microclimate over here in the Black Hills, especially against the Black Hills. Sometimes when they call for 30 inches of snow, we get an inch. Sometimes when they call for 30, we get 54. So it's always kind of what are we going to get versus what they're calling for. But it's always better to be prepared, and definitely being small enough. We have, Safeway on one side of town, Walmart is on the other. We also have Looters, and then quite a few little grocery chains, and then also like a natural earth stores. So, people they're close by. So no matter where you live at, you could get to those, definitely. I know as soon as the storm let up, our Walmart, particularly in Spearfish, has had a sordid history with battling storms. When they were first built, the roof collapsed in the first couple snowstorms. This year, they seemed to weather well. The roof held up through a lot of snow, but what didn't hold up was their refrigeration system. So all this snot piled up on to their HVAC system, and then all their refrigeration units, except for the ones that you plug in electrically in the middle, all the other ones just shut down. And so they were out, like I think it was either yesterday or the day before, they were out of all dairy, all eggs, anything that was.
I would have just dragged it all outside. Would have been like tent sale.
Exactly. But welcome to America. We have laws against that, and it sucks. But yeah, exactly. A similar thing happened during the pandemic, where a lot of ski resorts, like world-class ski resorts, shut down. And so they had all these restaurants with all this food, like, freaking $200 saffron that either was going to get pitched. Thankfully, I think most places gave it to employees, but grocery stores are held to a different standard.
There's a lot of rules. They can't just do that. Yeah. Even if the minute everything goes down, well, it's still cold and contained. If they would almost have to open the doors to the public and just say, come and get it right now.
Yep.
And even that would probably get them dinged. But such is the American way.
Food life. I know.
My mind is not the frontier way. It's not that I don't feel like I live on the frontier side of the state, but I feel like you do, and it's like do the best for your people as you can. But what Spearfish Canyon, I love the beauty of Spearfish Canyon. I guess as far as South Dakota sites, it's one of the more famous ones for in the autumn and the the beauty of it and the wildlife and things like that. Have you lived there your whole life?
No, I haven't. I actually, I've actually lived quite a few places, but I came here via Wyoming. I was living in Wyoming studying my chemical engineering degree, and I actually was part of my chemie degree was studying geology. So that's actually what I came up to the Black Hills twice for college field trips for both physical and historical geology. And so Spearfish Canyon, we came to the Black Hills, obviously, because the Black Hills have a full record of all of geologic history from Precambrian to present day. So I kind of went into the canyon, fell in love with it, which is how I kind of started becoming acquainted with South Dakota, being from Wyoming. So eventually moved here. But yeah, Spearfish Canyon has, it's famous because it's beautiful
Right.
and the winding roads with the creek, but it's older than the Grand Canyon. It's 12 times older than the Grand Canyon. And
And if
it's
you
amazing.
personally were drawn there to look at that historic record, obviously the trees and foliage cover the rock record. Where's the spot in the canyon that you go to see what you want to see?
So it depends, it depends on what you want to look at because the canyon's incredibly diverse. So Bridal Veil Falls is growing. So if I actually want to go look at, say, a granite feature versus a sedimentary rock floor, which is what the canyon is made out of. So the canyon is constantly eroding still. But where Bridal Veil Falls is it's actually coming out of a granite plate. So it's not eroding. And that's why Bridal Veil Falls is growing. So if I want to, go look at hydrodynamics, I like to go in the canyon. I like to go study Bridal Veil Falls and up that direction. There's actually an old historic mine that's up behind Rubicon Gulch up there as well. So, if I want to go out and look for old mining history and how that related to the geology of the area, then I would go up into the hills and like behind there. You can't go too far because Wharf Mine owns a lot of that. There's some private property up there, but so you have to definitely be careful with that. All over the hills, in fact.
And
But
it's
where it's
probably the kind of thing you don't want to go unless you're real knowledgeable about it. You don't want to go traipsing up around there alone.
uh,
Just as equally as dangerous as it is to go off into the Badlands unprepared and alone. I think up into the mountains or anywhere, don't stick your head in a mine if you don't know what you're doing. You know,
exactly that. Great point because it in my Instagram, and I had to have like this whole moral deal about it. I have this thing called 30 hikes in 30 days where I do hike alone. I've been doing it my whole life, but I mean, we'll get into this later. I'm an expert. There's mitigating factors, and there was this thing like where, especially on social media, just because I do it doesn't make it the right thing to
right,
do for most people. Like, and so setting that example, which is why in social media I do talk a lot about not being alone, even though you do talk about
right,
it, because I have to face it. I live in Spearfish, South Dakota, and there are not a lot of people anywhere near me who want to
right.
go the places I want to go. And so finding a hiking buddy, like my husband, he's like, you can't call what you do hiking. That's not
Ah,
hiking. That is insanity. And so when you run into that and you do want to study and you do have the tools and the knowledge and the education and the experience to be able to make the right decisions
right.
while you're out there alone, then that's another story. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So the key questions I have today are van life.
Oh yeah.
Van life. Do you actually live right now this minute? Are you recording from a van?
I am not. I'm actually back home when I'm in South Dakota. So I have a family. I have a son and a husband. My son is 14. And my husband and I have been together 16 years here. And van life was what I did outside of the family. There's no way I could live with both of them in a van, nor would they want to. Both of them,
I don't
my
know
son is
what
a
a van with a 14-year-old boy would smell like.
Oh my goodness. I don't know either because his room is much bigger than my van and it does reek. Yeah, like a teenage girl. And
I might
there
say, let's go climb in a mine instead of do that. Yeah.
instead I know, right? And there are people who have done that. Like there's a famous snowboarder, Shaun White. He was,
Mhm.
none of the kids today who snowboard really, they barely grasp his name. But when he was a 14-year-old and a 13-year-old competing, his mom lived in a van with him and his siblings and some other athletes at the time at ski resorts. But it wasn't full time. They didn't really do
Right.
exactly what I did. They would go on the road for a week or two, and then they had places that they could go to.
That were home
Whereas
based.
once I left South Dakota, which was right after Thanksgiving every single year, most years I was actually in Montana for Thanksgiving. So I would, because that's opening day and that's when
Mhm.
I had to work. So I'd be planted there the couple days before, and I would be living exclusively out of my van until everything thawed out and the resort shut down, sometimes even longer. There's a decompression month that has to occur between the life that I live as a snowboarder and coming home and having to be a mom. There's
Right.
a whole psychological, emotional aspect between transferring between lives. So oftentimes it would take me about a month to get home. And then once I was home, I would be off in the hills, not wanting to come inside. I'd be off in the
Right.
hills hiking around and exploring before I was finally like back to a normal routine here. But
How do you find I see, especially living in the wide open prairie or in the mountains or anywhere where you're closer to nature than you are to people, I see the amazing advantages to your house being compact, and I'm going to just roll out my pack and I'm outside and I'm immersed in it. But what if you feel the need to be private from all that, to be enclosed for whatever reason? Um, how did you find that? With just the space in a van was enough for you? Um,
yeah.
like, what about amenities and things? I am
Oh,
such
yeah.
a powder puff. When people talk about glamping, I'm like, oh my god, that's so rough, and I'm like, what do you mean your yurt had power? And I still am like, it's a yurt. So how did you ever get the urge where you're like, all right, I just need to go lodge for a few days. I need to shower and sleep on Egyptian cotton.
Um, so when I kind of fell into van life out of necessity because on one hand, so when I had first gone off to run off and left my family in South Dakota to be a snowboarder over in Montana, my brother actually went with me. And so we shared a condo the first year. And so I wasn't, you know, at first, but I could live there for free. And
Yeah.
that was the thing because I have a family over here. And even though it was really good money, I still didn't have the amount of money it costs to live in a resort town. I mean, rent
And
in
to
Big Sky,
basically being trying to maintain your family in two
yep,
households. Yeah.
yep. I had to try to find a way to live as cheap as possible. So the very next year, I actually found myself leaving my brother's condo. We kind of had a fight, and my brother, and I didn't know this at the time, but my brother had gone through chemotherapy, and that actually alters your mood. And so my brother was, and I didn't know it at the time, but he was being a colossal fucking asshole. I don't know if I could say that, but he was
Oh yeah.
being a jerk. And I moved out, and the only place that I had to move into at the time was not a van. It actually was an SUV. It was my Nissan Pathfinder. And so it was horrible to live in, but I finished out, I did 2.5 months in there and I finished out my season. I actually even won a competition that year. And had been living out of this Pathfinder for months. Didn't have any amenities, didn't have anything to cook, couldn't cook in there, couldn't keep any food. I mean,
Couldn't
I could
stand up.
barely even stay warm. There's no place. I mean, you're peeing outside.
Right.
That's essentially what I did for years, even in van life. But I do have friends, and I had a lot of friends who offered their couches and offered things like that. But I'm a private person. So I don't actually like to sleep on people's couches, nor do I like to bring my own drama or my issues and make them other people. I don't want to be somebody else's deal to have to take care of it. And also, a lot of my friends were paying $1,000 per room to live. I didn't need to be living for free off of them either. So I was
Right.
perfectly fine living in the Pathfinder. So luckily, I also worked at the resort, so I could just get up and go use the bathrooms near the employee locker rooms. But I was pretty much outside. That was what my job was. I was a snowboarder. I also coached snowboarding. I also did things like set up the resort before everybody gets there, like drilling fence. So I was outside
Right.
all the time anyway, constantly. The only time I was inside is if like I went to a friend's house and had dinner, which when you live in a resort town, or if you even any mountain town, usually there's community meals that happen, especially small towns. Like there's this tiny town in Montana called Cook City, end of the world. And even there, you'll find that most people actually prefer to eat their meals as a community because in the wintertime, it's so dark and lonely. You're
Right.
just gathering, not just households, but everybody.
Right.
So that's what it's like. So eating dinner, I was always mostly indoors, but not always. I had to learn to cook in the van. I didn't have any amenities. There was no heat. I did try. I gutted the van myself and built it out myself. And we did try to put in an inverter and an electric system, and that just failed. It's kind of an older van. It was kind of hard to figure out. And so I ended up burning my inverter out and not having heat the first winter. And then propane is really difficult to kind of manage up in the mountains, especially anything above 4,000 to 6,000 feet. Propane starts having issues anyway. You need a large quantity of it, like big tanks, to be able to do that. And I didn't. So that was a work in progress that took years to kind of just realize that I actually didn't need it. I did not need heat. It just was nice to have getting out of bed in the morning.
Right.
But and yeah, no running water and no bathroom. And that actually, I talk about this a lot because I've actually given a lot of interviews about van life, especially being back in the day, years ago. When I was first doing it, it was a big shocker because I'm a woman and I'm
Right.
living out with no bathroom or nothing, and
Well,
people
and
are like, what do you
I think
do?
the first question that came to mind for me wasn't I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, how'd you do your hair and makeup? And it's like, no, the first question that came to me is lady business hygiene.
Oh yeah.
Anything to do with your menstrual cycle at all?
Just
How
be
would I
prepared.
handle all that if I was living in that different setting that I've never experienced before? What was, what I don't, that might be on the list of things I wouldn't be able to overcome. I too might be able to say my sleeping bag is warm enough, no heat is fine, but I also might be able to say if I don't have immediate access to chocolate and fresh pads, fuck it.
Fuck this. So on
How
one
do you
hand,
keep
I was
bears from
always
breaking into the van?
oh, that's another thing. You can't. When a bear decides, and there are bears in Montana, there are bears right there. And a lot of my friends carry 45 of bear rounds because of it and bear
Yeah.
spray. But bears happen and they'll break into your house too. They will
Right.
come in through the front door or the window.
I know there have been this year alone. There have been more than with the continuous spread of ring cameras out in Rapid and Sturgis, and I think I saw some from even up in the Lee Deadwood area of people like having bears like triggering their ring camera, and I'm like, we've got porch pirates over here stealing our Christmas presents. You guys have bears.
Yeah. Here's a good one for you. There's actually a run in Big Sky in resort as part of just open access. Anybody can go in there. It's called Bear's Lair, and it's called Bear's Lair because there are two bears, black bears that hibernate in there. And so ski patrol, bears hibernate during the winter, so you can almost guarantee that you're not gonna see a bear until well into spring. But they start poking out. They can poke out, especially if like we have experienced some warmer winters coming into February even
Yeah.
and melt. Bears can wake up a little bit early. And so ski patrol in the springtime in Big Sky, they go in and monitor bears lair all the time. If there's signs of bear tracks, if the bears are awake, they shut it down. But so when you're living in the mountains in the dead of winter, you really don't have to worry about bears. They're sleeping. But in the springtime, you definitely do. And more so, I actually had more run-ins with foxes wanting to come in either to the van and I actually my final winter in Big Sky, I was actually living in a broken down camper a friend of mine owned, and he wanted me. The deal was I could stay inside of there while I renovated it for him because I had built my own van out. So when I was living there, I actually had a fox enter the dwelling with me and want to come inside. But so yeah, foxes were more of a hassle than bears.
I would be in such trouble because I've had days I've gone out to my deck and my kitties are semi-farm cats, and I have had not have my glasses on, and I'm like, "Come in the house, kitty! Come in the house!" And then my kid is like, "Mom, why are you yelling at that possum? What are you doing? Close the door before it comes in here." And I'm like, "Oh, stay outside, kitty."
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be like, "You're warm. Get in here. Come on."
Come in the house,
Yes.
little possum.
You can be the big spoon. I don't care, but just don't act up.
I was gonna say one interesting thing though while we're on animals about Montanans who asked me if living over here in South Dakota is about mountain lions, because they have them over there, but they're much more rare to spot. Whereas our mountain lions here, once a week during the wintertime, we get on Spearfish classifieds that, oh, my dog ran away. I saw a mountain lion come in and snatch it up. And it's a regular post here.
My
and it's
dog
like
ran away.
Yeah.
That's like when you tell the kids, we sent him to live at the farm.
Yeah.
That's what we do over here. When something happens to your pet, we took him to live at the farm.
They went to live at the farm. They're okay.
To live at the farm. What about spearfish? So having that broad spectrum of the athletic part of snowboarding, the teaching part of it, the living so independently and whatnot. How do you get that fix back home at Spearfish?
I can't.
Okay.
Again, so I can't in the same way.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do have ski resorts here,
right,
but they're not open all the time. For me, my internal biological clock is that winter starts in November and ends in May. And South Dakota's like maybe mid-December, and we're definitely done by March, So, and it becomes really difficult too when the last few warmer winters have left it so where we can't really ski Terry Peak much of it anymore. And that's where we're at with it. And so I have this, I crossed the bar long ago. I'm more of an extreme snowboarder than I ever thought I was going to be when I first started out in this whole thing. And so my appetite is ginormous.
Yeah.
So I can't really satisfy it. And that's why I actually have not been in the state of South Dakota for any winter. This is my first one since 2014. Before that, I was really trying to get by with like trips to Colorado with my brother and going to like Montana and like getting by on that route. But once I got told, hey, did you know you're a really good snowboarder? By somebody who I thought was a really good snowboarder, and then offered a job, and then kind of fell into this world of winter mountaineering.
Paid to do what you love.
Yeah, that was the ticket. And I rode that for a number of years. The pandemic actually squashed it. So whereas I lived van life all the way up until 2020, I had big aspirations that the pandemic more or less killed. I had already developed 2 female first descent titles, and I wanted a third. I wanted the most gnarliest mountain I feel on earth. Everybody's like Everest. It's not, it's Denali, and it's in Alaska, and there has never been a female winter solo descent of Denali, only a male one. And that was like my calling. And that's what I was planning on focusing on. And then the pandemic happened. And when that
And
happened, resorts shut down.
there's probably not a lot of anything comparable here in South Dakota for training purposes for that kind of an ascent.
Yes.
I
For,
mean,
yeah,
blackouts,
absolutely. Not even
blackouts is
ice
great for
climbing.
me, but probably nothing for you.
Yeah. There's a lot to brag about. Don't get me wrong. I do
Mhm.
brag about the Black Hills, especially because we actually, so if you look at all of America, going all the way to Europe, the Black Hills, because the Rocky Mountains actually lie west of us, the Black Hills are the largest vertical drop in North America, all the way east to the Pyrenees. So even, even mountains over in the East Coast and the Appalachian Mountains don't have the same vertical ascent that our mountains do. Terry Peak offers over 1,200 vertical feet, which is impressive to people over on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But you're right. It's not, doesn't provide I can't get the training ground here because even climbing ice waterfalls, you're not going to be able to climb more than 1,000 vertical, rock and ice included, anywhere. And so
Right.
that kind of puts you at a disadvantage when you need to climb something that's over, 20,000 feet. So, so
And remember, you're talking to the prairie girl on the east side here. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Palisades. That's the highest I've liked to go. I'm not a skier or snowboarder. I've been to Great Bear and
yeah,
gone
which is fun,
sledding.
I've heard. Yeah.
I don't ice skate, snow, ski, none of that. I've just, like I said, I've been to Great Bear and I tubed it like once. And I thought that was perilous and terrifying. So,
Yeah.
meanwhile, I was getting like totally passed by like 6-year-olds with their Crocs on, going, "What is her problem?"
What is this?
They were drinking their cocoa and like FaceTiming somebody, and I'm screaming for dear life. So,
Yeah.
what?
The Black Hills do offer a lot to keep me like physically trained through the summer, though. I mean, the Black Hills are incredible. They're really steep and, rugged, with really old rock, granite, just, cutting out of the ground. Deadwood, Lead, all these old towns are shaped the way they are. They're actually built up onto the mountainside because the little valleys between the peaks are just so shallow. They're just really
Mhm.
jagged. The Black Hills at one point in time in history were 14,000 feet in elevation. They were huge. But like I said, we're just that old in this part of the state
Right.
that erosion over millennia happened to where now they're 7,000 feet,
Right.
which is great for summertime training and keeping yourself, in tip top shape, being able to, go up Black Elk Peak and back down, 9 miles, being able to get yourself to do that in less than an hour or an hour and a half. Doing things like that keeps your body going great. But as for the winter time, uh, my poor husband and kid, the longer I'm here in the winter, the more depressed I've gotten in previous years, just because I'm ready to do the big, 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 gnarly, nasty things and live in the cold weather and just be a heathen and a Yeti. And
Yeah.
that part of me is screaming to get out. And we get these cold spells, we definitely have that going for us, but we just don't get the snow load,
Right.
consistent snow load.
Right.
And we just don't have the terrain that's
And not
needed.
and not only that, but the snow isn't always snow you can play on, because I'm sure everybody not from where you are or that hasn't participated in the sport the way you have is thinking, what is she complaining about? She just said they get 52 inches of snow.
I
It's not
know.
the kind of snow you can use for what you want to do.
That's true. It's true. And this is going to come as a shocker to a lot of people because I've noticed on social media, a lot of conversation has been about like, oh, I hope the Californians enjoy our weather. And I'm like, I'm from California originally. We had 10 feet in a
Right.
storm.
Right.
Like the Sierra Nevada mountains or Mount Whitney's just absolutely massive. And
Right.
snow, we do have winter in California and it gets brutally cold. Not only that, in the desert where you don't typically see snow, it can snow there, but it gets sub-zero down in the
Mhm.
desert too. So yeah, when I was growing up, I did grow up on the coast coastal California, but we got up into the mountains. My dad was an old hippie and loved the mountains more. So I remember getting stuck in a house that we actually lived at near Big Bear, in Arrow Bear. And I remember getting stuck in the house and you couldn't open the front door because that's what the storms bring.
Right.
And it's now, thankfully, you know, it would be gone, just kind of like how it is here when the wind just takes it away.
Some other part of nature fixes it.
Yes. Yeah. And so eventually you're buried out, and then, you know, you have all this sledding and skiing and snowboarding, but you don't live there without four-wheel drive. And you definitely don't live. Most people find it extremely difficult to live even in Lead without four-wheel drive in the winter, because once the snow comes, it stays. And
you're
you're
not seeing
talking
a lot
about
of smart cars. That's why I'm always like, why is the parking so bad in Deadwood? Like, you'd think the parking spaces would be truck sized.
Yeah.
You know, but I guess they're wagon train sized. I don't know. Apparently there was compact wagon trains, or they only needed room for their gold pan and their mule. But yeah, you'd think that it would be a little more room for some trucks with a hitch and maybe a dually or whatnot. But
barely.
When you're traveling and you tell people home base is South Dakota, what is something that they say, oh, South Dakota, and they mention it and they're totally wrong? Something they 100% believe about South Dakota and they're so far off base.
I've gotten that people think that we actually are closer to the Great Lakes, like after Minnesota. Like we are. Yeah, there's Americans are really stupid. They really are. A lot of people don't even, it takes them a minute to register that South Dakota is a state, you know. And a lot of my friends, sometimes they're not sure if I'm from North or South, like, you know. And then some other people I think that it actually lies. They call it east. They call, you know, oh, that's out east. I'm like, well, no, you know, it is Midwest.
In the middle. I mean,
yeah,
we're in the middle of all of it.
We are in the middle. Yeah.
So
I was a dumb Californian, but I always thought South Dakota was a lot more east than it was before I moved to Wyoming. I didn't even know Wyoming was a state when my dad said we were moving there. And I'm like,
you're like, is that Canada? Is that in Canada?
Like 90s. And I'm like, what? And then we got the map out, and I went from my beloved ocean, because I was a surfer first. I was not a snowboarder first. I was a surfer first. So I looked at my ocean and I went, and I lost it, but I didn't have a choice either. So
yeah. What is something that you've heard someone in their belief about what South Dakota is like get right? Something that they've described it. Oh, isn't your state like this? And you're like, yep, it really is.
Yep, it really is. Like in terms of like non-inflammatory, because a lot of people have opinions about our socio-political climate. Mostly that's a lot of what people want to talk about with me when I'm on the road.
Do you think that's more in the last few recent years, or always going all the way back in the time that you've considered South Dakota home base, or has that evolved?
It's gotten much worse and pronounced, but even going to Montana, being in Big Sky, so most of the people who are actually living in Big Sky are from much bigger states. It's a world-class resort. People who want to work there are from all over New York, everywhere. So when you're like South Dakota, for a long time now, people have always been like cringed and been like, oh, what's it like to live there? You know, bunch of bigots. And, you know, for the most part, I would definitely put a Band-Aid on it and not want to discuss it, because I knew when I moved here that South Dakota was pretty behind in times in some of the ideology, but it's so beautiful, you know, and outwardly people were friendly. And, you know, at the time that was my own privilege. You know, at the time I appear, especially when I was going through college at Black State University, when I switched my degree, you know, I was this wildly successful white married female mom. Everybody was great to me, you know, so it took even me a while to see exactly where we were at and why people cringe from a lot of other states, except Vermont. There's a lot of people from Vermont actually who know where South Dakota is, that it's not east, that we lie
Right.
between Wyoming and North Dakota, who know what it is and actually had family who had lived here. So that was interesting to me that I had Vermont friends who had a connection previously to South Dakota. But yeah,
And then
took
they
me a
were
while to
like,
realize.
now that's going to stay a flyover state.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who think it's incredibly all of it's flat when it's not. Even going east, like we just talked, there is Big Bear or Great Bear. There are geological features all over the state, even in the north,
Right.
and southeast corners. So people think that the whole thing is flat and that the Black Hills are just hills and don't actually have some serious elevation. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're more like mountains.
A couple videos ago doing this, I talked to somebody that has worked with Eros and talked about the geology of up north and used a lot of terms that I had never heard because that's not my realm. And I spent a good few days like looking at books and looking things up and being like, I've never heard it called this, and I've never the land and the water features like in the Aberdeen area and all that. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
we got something totally different. I always just think about my prairie. I've always just think and the granite of my river and how much the people have wrecked my river right here in my town and everything. And
Yeah.
but that's like putting my hands on the granite there, that's coming home, or standing with my feet in the dirt right under the sky. That to me, that's home. But yeah, we've got a wide variety of features in our little circle. If you
Yeah.
can find what you're looking for, except the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can find remnants of many oceans.
Mhm,
There were oceans here. There were a bunch of inland seas. We
mhm.
actually sit on South Dakota, more of where you're at, less here in the Black Hills. More where you're at, though, is kind of the end of, the kind of the original continental plate that grew, that everything else is attached to now. And that the northeastern part of South Dakota is part of that. And everything else has docked on, so has been pushed across the oceans and attached to land masses and, kind of been solidified together by volcanic activity. And all these things that have gone on have shaped our landscape. The flat part, I mean, of our state was just where a huge glacier just scraped everything back. And
Like
then before
like
that,
smoothing the frosting on a cake.
yeah, just
Yeah.
we're gonna just slide across here, and yep. And
Mhm.
then every now and then, where the ground was soft or things like that, I would dig out a huge trench
Yep.
but over millions and millions and millions of years. But it's this area is incredible. The whole West Coast is fairly new compared to our landmass here in South Dakota. The old coastline, the original coastline for our continent after we kind of broke up from this last supercontinent, was Arizona. Arizona was beachfront property, and everything after that has kind of been added on, which is why you see really weird inclusions, especially in the Black Hills. A lot of our granite, that is 1 to 2 billion-year-old granite that's exposed in the hills, was actually placed there from inland seas and lava
Sliding it
and
over
continent
here.
building. Yeah,
Mhm.
it wasn't original. So, but it was shifted around. And it's the same thing over in Oregon. In Oregon, you'll find that an entire island that used to exist over in the East Asian Pacific Sea now is docked in the middle of Oregon. So, that was, so you kind of going back to this, I did van life up until kind of everything shut down. And then I actually lived in my Honda. I lived in a car, a four-door car for 2 years with two surfboards, a skateboard, and a snowboard.
I was just going
And
to ask, how did you fit a snowboard in it? And then you're like, let me throw in some other things. Let me just.
so I spent some time in Oregon checking out its geology, much like I had done here in South Dakota and then did in Montana. For the last 2 years, I'd spent about 200,000 miles living out of my Honda with packed full of boards.
Oh, wow.
And that one was more or less year round, whereas I was doing van life as a snowboarder, 6 months on, 6 months off and coming home. I spent 2020 to 2022, just this last spring, kind of out of state
In a Honda.
in a Honda. Yeah.
Which
Uh,
specific type of Honda?
it was a Honda. It was a Honda Civic. Yep.
Oh my God.
2008, no, 2006 Honda Civic. I called it Mighty Mouse because when I
Okay.
got it, it actually came from your neck of the woods. It actually came from Pierre, I believe, but it was on a freaking old rancher's farm in a field. And when it got dropped off in front of my house, it had about 800 mice living in it. And so the
Yeah,
smell,
that used to be somebody's go to town car.
it
They're like,
was,
we don't want to waste fuel in the truck. We got our go to town car.
we got this really, yeah. And it used to be nice, but, and I actually had driven it once before. It belonged to the wife of my husband's former boss. I'd driven it actually once from his house to a shop, and it was really nice. By the time I saw it again, and at the time his boss wanted like $3,000 for it. I think my husband paid $1,200 for it by the time we got it because of the mice problem, because he put it out in the field, didn't need it for the winter. Springtime
Right.
happened. By the time we get it the next year, mice, South Dakota. So I got it took me about 100 hours of manual labor to clean mice shit out from every nook and cranny,
Oh,
to make
wow.
sure the wiring, because they love to chew wiring, was okay, which it was. So I cleaned out this car, and then I loaded up with all my stuff, and I did Pandemic from the road, which I was actually trying to stay away from people.
That's where you were probably hoping a fox would move in and help you out.
Yeah. Speaking of cats, I left the windows open and let my cat get at whatever live mice might have been left. Most of what was left over was just dead mouse bodies, and there were dozens of them. Oh, it was gross. And she didn't get her name Mighty Mouse at first either. Like, I called her the Mouse Mobile because it stunk like mice for a good 6 months afterwards. No matter what I did, I bleached everything. But and then I was like partial into my journey. I took my Honda places you should never ever take a vehicle. We were talking about never hike alone, never hike alone. Also, never drive a 4-door sedan up Engineers Pass in Colorado. Well, so I did that though, and luckily nothing happened and my car didn't break. I had to drive over boulders. I had ramps that I would set up and drive over boulders. It's an ATV trail, in case you're wondering. Jeeps don't even go. So I did that, and when I came back down, it was the most harrowing journey of my life. Coming back down, getting up was fine. I found this old ghost town, which was awesome, Animas Forks. Went up Engineers Fast, came back down, and then I was so full of scared adrenaline that once I got back to town, I actually puked out the window. I actually had to get out of my car and pull down my pants because I was so scared. I didn't know if I was going to shit my pants or puke, but so that's how she got her name. What?
Weren't you worried that maybe those were symptoms of hantavirus from all the mice?
Oh, no, this was like a year later or like 4 months later. But I was nervous that I would get sick from my stuff, but I used so much bleach in that car that I was almost positive that if there was something in there that could get you,
you got it
was
first. You got it.
But
first.
So Animas Sports.
Is there anything in South Dakota that you haven't been to visit that's on your checklist to try? I know this summer you just randomly jaunted all the way over to Sioux Falls and back one day, like just a bullet across the state and went right back. But is there anything that you think I probably should see that? And I'm going to guess that if you say there is, it's got something to do with geology.
Yeah, it would be. I haven't spent any time up northeast or the northwestern corner of South Dakota. So I really haven't been much more north of like Nislin. I think that's north of Bell. But so I would like to go up and kind of explore that area. I took a small road trip somewhere up that direction and came right back, but didn't do a lot of exploring. And there's like So as soon as you go out that direction, there's a lot of features that kind of are reminiscent of Badlands areas.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I'd definitely like to go up there. I've actually been east quite a bit, and all throughout the center. But yeah, northeastern corner. It's kind of crazy. I actually know I've lived here, or I've been exploring here for about 20 years. And I actually got more of Oregon explored, and they're roughly the same size a state, you know.
Did you
But I
go
got
there though thinking I'm on a limited time frame, so I better do it? Do you find that here you're like, well, I've got all the time. I'll do it sometime. And then sometime
Yep.
just hasn't happened?
Yeah, there's that option or there's that aspect of it, I should say. Absolutely. You know, when you're here, I feel like when I'm here, I want to be stuck with my family. It's kind
Yeah.
of one of those things too where and they don't like my dude just doesn't love to take road trips all the time, and neither does my son. And it's kind of like forcing them to go participate in this part of my life that I just am absolutely like passionate about. And so then it becomes something where you're like, well, we can do it at some point. So, you know, I've explored pretty much, I could bet to say that I've explored almost all of the Black Hills. I've tried to get up on every ridge, up on every peak. I've tried to get places, find old gold mines, all the whole 9 yards. But that's right out my backyard, and it's easy to do because the access is right there. But when you have to drive for hours, you know, and
Right.
you're like,
A trip in
nobody,
the car
no
is different.
co-partners. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm more nervous about sleeping in my vehicles alone in this state than I am out west, just because it's more known just to leave people in their vehicles alone out west than it is here. So, you know, you can get in trouble more out here. I'm not talking about necessarily worried about somebody breaking into my car, but more like getting hassled by people who don't take kindly to having some strange chick sleeping out in a parking lot, you know.
Right. Right.
So that also puts kind of a damper on how far I can travel, which shout out to Tiffany because she actually let me sleep in her driveway when I was out in Sioux Falls. Um, well, when I went out when Dakotans for Health was doing kind of like this pre-rally and a fundraiser at the Democracy Center, I went out with Tiffany and we had a great time that night. And I didn't get drunk, but I certainly was too late to be driving home out all the way to Spearfish.
Right.
And she offered she was like, "Oh, hey, I have an extra bedroom. You can sleep inside." But obviously, I'm a dirtbag and I love sleeping in my house. You know, my car is
Your
my
house on
house. So
wheels.
I'm
Your
like,
house
I'm
on
home.
wheels.
That's what I told her. I said, if you're okay that I'm out in your driveway. So she's like, yeah. So she she made sure her dude know that there was a hippie sleeping out in her driveway. So he was nervous.
Not a stranger, just strange.
Yeah, just strange. I even have a nice car, you know, so it shouldn't be that strange, but
Right. Well, as we start to wrap up here, what is one thing about your life in South Dakota, um, particularly related to the spearfish area, that you think anybody from elsewhere in the state, that's part of my goal with this project, is to try and be a better tourist in my own state or learn more
yeah.
about it. What is something that, set aside the things that are always marketed, like Bridal Veil and the canyon, if somebody was coming out to your county area, um, where only the locals go, what is something that we should come in, and what's our hidden gem to find?
You know, the best part of the Black Hills is the fact that you can drive up to any parking area, you know, Forest Service parking area, and just get out and start walking. And that's what I recommend you do because you will stumble upon views that are just the same, if not more magical, than the views that are on, say, reported hikes that are in the
Mm-hmm.
media, things like that, or going to see Bridal Veil. Getting out in the springtime, you will see waterfalls. Snow melts, it runs off rock. So there's a lot of people who are at Bridal Veil Falls, but just up the canyon a little ways is another waterfall. And if you just pulled off into that spot that you saw a car could park into, there is a trail right there. Any pull off in the canyon is a trail right there. Just follow it and see it where it goes. That's what I would recommend. Some
There we go.
awesome way to explore. Yeah.
And always
Also,
drink water and always have good shoes.
Yes. And do remember that if you get up on top of the hills, you have service. So, this whole lost thing in the Black Hills, you can go 10 miles in any direction. You'll find a town. But if you just get on top, elevate, get up high, the whole national forest has service up there.
Yeah.
Yep. So be safe.
And then once you're up high, stay put.
Stay put. Yeah. Don't go wandering off. I know that is a huge mistake people unfortunately do make is.
Yep. Once you've established a safe place, especially if you can find a safe place with service, once you've established a space, stay there and just be as reflective as you can. Yeah.
Yep. Definitely. I also recommend, and comes from my snowboarding side because I carry beacons into avalanche terrain.
Oh yeah.
I hike in the Black Hills with an active beacon on, which means if I don't come home by dinner time and my husband calls search and rescue, he can tell them she has a beacon on. It's a location device. They can find me. That's, they're $100 to $200 and they're absolutely worth it. They don't make a noise, but they just emit a signal. So
yeah.
Yep.
It's awesome. Well, thank you so much for telling me all about your van life. And I've got things to Google now. I've got some code words here I'm going to look up. I don't think it's for me. Not even for one day. I've spent a night in a car, sleeping in a car. I've been stranded and slept in a car. I've parked in someone's driveway, but boy, I didn't expect you to say, so for 6 months out of the year.
I was in this
school. And I try and stay outside because it's fresh.
It's fresh. It's clean. I just stay outside all the time.
Right. Like, smells like Teen Spirit. No, thank you.
Smells like dirty old lady.
See, and that goes back to how do you keep the bears away?
They're sleeping. Do it in the wintertime. Yeah.
Whoa.
Colder the better.
Thank you, Leah. I'm gonna sign you off. Bye.
Sounds good. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Okay, Jenny has a whole list of things to look up now. I've read the book Into the Wild, and I knew at about page 6 that wasn't the lifestyle for me. But it is interesting to hear from another woman that it is her passion, and she makes it into part of her life and part of her work. And but yet I love that South Dakota is her home base. I love that when she says she comes back here, it is to gather with family, and because that's what home should be for everybody. So getting ready to sign off, though. Gonna go tuck in all my critters and make sure that I got enough taco supplies to last through the next few days as the wind blows. And everybody be safe, stay home. Don't travel in the ground blizzard. Don't travel in the below negative weather. I know everybody wants to try and get somewhere and get home for Christmas with family, but you can find and connect in other ways. If it's going to be the longest night, have it be the best night. So happy solstice, everybody, and stay safe.